Good afternoon, everyone. It's beer time. Content is king, distribution is God. That's what I'm going to talk about. It was 2006. I was a newly minted entrepreneur, having moved to Bombay after spending 6 years in advertising and a year at business school. And there's a gentleman named Subhash Chandra. Those of you familiar with the Indian media scene know he is the founder of one of the large media companies in India. He said, I heard him say in a talk, that content is king, distribution is God. Now, I found that really profound, and it really left an impact on me. But I don't think he actually realized what it would mean in 2016, 15, 14, 13 even. I think his intent in terms of what he was trying to say, or the implications of it, was very different, and where we are today with the meaning of this phrase is very different. I'm going to start by just sort of making sure that we all are on the same page in terms of what content marketing is. It's been about 5 or 10 years where we have actually been, as practitioners of advertising communications, media, etc., we've been sort of dissing mainstream advertising in a way where it's all about branded content, branded entertainment. And if we just call it content marketing to kind of get on the same page, this is one of my favorite definitions, which is that traditional marketing and advertising is telling the world you're a rock star, and content marketing is showing the world you're one, right? So now that we've got that out of the way, content marketing can come in various forms and formats. Sometimes it takes weeks and months of preparation. Sorry, I think there's a little bit of Sometimes it comes with weeks and months of preparation, and sometimes it's just sort of spontaneous. But nobody's going to forget Felix Baumgartner in a hurry. Let's just watch this video for a second before I carry on talking about it.
This is Mission Control, launch plus 80 seconds. Clear of dead zone, all elements are still go at this time. Altitude 36,000 feet, crossing tropopause. As you are approaching the bottom of the jet stream, expect possible turbulence and strong wind shears. Approaching final jump altitude in stratosphere. Activate jump oxygen system.
All right, capsule oxygen is off.
Roger. Proceed to exit. Felix, you are clear to jump at your own discretion.
Cleared. I'm on my own.
I think it's pretty safe to say that brands don't do this sort of thing every day. I don't know if you remember, but this is, I think, at the peak when I think just before he jumped, there were about 8 million people watching this live at the same time, which was a record of sorts at that time. I don't know if it's still a record right now. So this is an example of something that takes months of preparation. And then there's stuff that just happens spontaneously, quite by accident. So there's a story about a guy called Shrikant. Shrikant was a talented creative at Jack in the Box, which is a part of my company, the 120 Media Collective. And Shrikant used to work on the Sony music business. Now, those of you who are familiar with India know that songs are a big part of movie marketing and promotion, which is why Indian films are full of song and dance. In case you were wondering, now the penny drops, right? Okay, so what happens is that they use these songs and music to promote their films. Now, Shrikant got a call at 2 o'clock in the morning from the Sony Music client to say, okay, listen, we're in deep shit because there's this movie that's coming out in 6 months' time, which was starring the daughter of a big, big superstar and the son-in-law of another big, big superstar, and it was going to be the biggest movie of the year, etc. And this track that they had recorded in the studio just a couple of days ago had leaked on YouTube. So they said, what should we do? So Shrikant, thinking very quickly on his feet, said, let's create our own version, because we can't fight this. If it's out, it's out. So let's create our own version. Let's make it go big on social. And so this is the story of Shrikant and what he did. And those of you who are familiar with this track, Kolaveri, know how big it actually became. So here's a little story about how it happened.
How much money do you think is required to make a song world super hit? 10 million? 20 million? We spent zero. Close the mouth. I'll tell you how. First, we shot the making of the song and then added subtitles for all the non-Tamilians. Then the most important, we added the collar ringback tone code for making some pocket money. We then put up the video on our YouTube channel and then seeded it on social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter. To get the audience watching and talking about our song, we created a hook, hashtag why this Kolaveri, which is a commonly used phrase in my state, Tamil Nadu, when somebody irritates you. Next 3 days, full tweeting different irritating situations with the hashtag why this Kolaveri, but we also added the link to our song with it. So people who could relate to that irritating situation clicked on the link, watched the song and forgot their irritation. They also understood the usage of the question why this Kolaveri, and then they started tweeting about things which frustrated them with the hashtag and also added the link to our song. Basically, people love venting their frustration on social media, and we use this insight to get hashtag Kolaveri trending on Twitter over 3 full days. Even people like Amitabh Bachchan ji and Anand Mahindra ji tweeted. The YouTube views kept on increasing. People were viewing, sharing. More than 41 million views across 220 countries. People love to ape a trend. So we put up a candid video of our own people singing the song in chorus, following which hundreds of people put in their own versions. Some even organized flash mobs, not just in India, even Netherlands and New Zealand. Oh, and by the way, the total collar ringback tones downloaded was 2 million and still counting. This brought us so much revenue that we are still counting actually. Okay, the enormous online buzz pushed even TV and print media to talk about the song. Articles were written on blogs, tabloids and even newspapers. It was featured in news channels and music channels. Every radio station in the country played Kolaveri. In simple words, earned media is estimated to be more than 67 million rupees only. Money spent, zero. Mission accomplished.
So the interesting thing about Shrikant is that he's not only a brilliant creative, he's also a great actor and presenter. So that's Shrikant over there. Unfortunately for us, he's no longer with us, and he started his own agency. Um, but the interesting thing is that we would never have been able to do what we did in today's day and age without the support of paid media. So this was done completely organically in 2011, not 1 rupee spent, right? Again, interestingly, as we kind of interrupted with this little message in the middle, it crossed 85 million views in about 4 months, and then it inched its way to 100 million 4 years later. This happened on the 17th of November, 2011, and on the 30th of December 2011, CNN did the most downloaded and viewed track in the world that year. So that was the power of what happened there. So let's get into the meat of what I'm here to talk about. Creators are turning distributors, and distributors are turning creators, and their worlds are completely intertwined, more so than you think. And we'll talk about how that's happening going forward. Netflix. Everyone knows Netflix now. It's hard to even remember a time when Netflix was a company that sent you DVDs in the mail, right? And that wasn't that long ago. It was about 5 years ago, if you think about it. And then they became this amazing video platform, and then they became this amazing content creator. They spent $3 billion in creating content back in 2014, and this year in 2016, they're spending $6 billion, right? They were moving across the world in Europe, Asia, Australia, Latin America, 3 or 4 countries at a time. And then in early Jan this year, they mastered a coup of sorts, and they went live in 131 countries at one go. And currently, as we speak, they are disrupting the entire content consumption game globally, including the feature film industry and the independent feature film industry, right? But what's interesting about these guys is that they're doing this, starting off as a platform and becoming content creators. And on the other hand, you have HBO, which is arguably the greatest content creator of our time, which is still a part of Time Warner. My sense is they're going to spin it off as a separate company by October this year. You heard it here first, in case you haven't heard it before. So HBO, obviously because they've got marquee properties like Game of Thrones, etc., they can afford to command audiences to come onto their own platform, or so they think. So they launched HBO Now with the launch of Game of Thrones Season 5 on the 12th of April 2015. It worked really well. People signed up in droves. I think it was $13 or $19 of a monthly subscription, and so it was working really well, but then there haven't been many signups after that. Game of Thrones Season 6 is coming out in April. Maybe it'll go up after that. But I think what's most interesting here is Ted Sarandos, who is the Chief Content Officer of Netflix, saying that the goal is to become HBO before HBO can become us. Now, if that isn't proof of content creators becoming distributors and distributors becoming creators and their entire worlds being intertwined, then I don't know what is. It's a complex world, right? We need to figure out who is my audience. I need to know what do they want, and we need to know where I can find them, right? So we can talk about each of these for about a couple of hours each, right? But for the purpose of today, we're going to focus on where we can find our audience. So it's a case of different strokes for different folks. It's not really simple. It's not like you'll find millennial women on one platform and, say, baby boomer men on another platform, and it's not, right? Everyone is everywhere. It's all mixed up. It's a bit crazy. What you see before you, ladies and gentlemen, is a wildly inaccurate diagram with no scientific basis whatsoever, right? But it gives you an idea of how things are panning out. Broadly speaking, on the x-axis, you have the number of hours of content being created. On the y-axis, you have the number of platforms. It's a bit of an exaggeration, but you get the idea, right? So the more content we create, the more platforms come into existence. Excuse me. These logos are quite familiar, I'm sure. Most of them are. Some of them are Indian, and you may not have heard of them. But you know, this is how we're consuming content today. And it's very different from how we were consuming content 5 or 10 years ago. Ad-supported video on demand, AVOD. Subscription video on demand, SVOD. Transaction video on demand, TVOD. Okay, so what is this? if you look at the brands, some of them are AVOD, some of them are SVOD, some of them are both. Now, someone has to pay for your content, right? It's either you or it's the advertisers trying to reach you. So someone's got to pay for it. TVOD, which is where you pay for content, one piece of content at a time, is going to disappear any moment, right? iTunes is TVOD, but then people like Netflix and Spotify have come about and completely obliterated that model by telling you all you have to do is pay a fixed fee every month, every year, and you can have access to all the content that you want. My sense is, though, what is going to work best is the freemium model, which balances audience interests with business realities, where you can get a lot of content for free, but you have to pay extra for certain content, or it's in tiers, right? I heard something really interesting the other day. There's an NYU professor named Scott Galloway, very controversial guy. Has anyone heard of him? Some people heard of him? Okay, so a very controversial guy, says a lot of edgy stuff, and he's what I call a professor for the internet age, because everything he says is broadcast on YouTube, and every slide of his is tweet-worthy, right? So he said something recently that advertising is something only poor people are going to have to deal with in a few years' time, which makes sense if you think about it, right? Okay, so how many of you have heard of Vessel? Some? No, not really? Okay. Vessel was started in December 2014 by a guy named Jason Kilar. Jason Kilar was the CEO of Hulu, and he created it as, it was dubbed the YouTube killer. And the whole model over here was that, just to kind of, again, I'm going to put out here a little bit of an equalization fact. How many of you are familiar with the economics of YouTube and how it works? Right? So basically, you watch content on YouTube for free, and it's actually funded by advertisers because they reach you, and they pay YouTube, but YouTube doesn't own that content. That content is created by a lot of people, including many of us over here. And so when they pay YouTube $100, YouTube gets to keep a piece of it because they are the platform owner. And so they keep $45, and $55 goes to the content creator. So that's how that whole economy works, right? What Jason Kilar and Vessel were saying is that YouTube gives you 55, we're going to give you 70. Okay, then what's the catch? The catch is A, we're new. B, all we want from you is exclusivity for your content, not forever, for 72 hours. 72 hours, you give us your content and put it nowhere else. At 1 minute past 72 hours, you can put it anywhere you feel like, right? That's one. So that's on the content side. On the audience side, what they're saying is that you're used to getting everything for free on YouTube. You can do that over here as well, but if you want to sign up for that exclusive early access of content in that 72-hour window, and if you want it ad-free, you need to pay us $3 a month. A bit of an edgy proposition, if you ask me, for a generation that's never paid a cent for content in their lives, right? So the jury's out on how well Vessel is going to do. They do have a few things going for them. Let's take a look at what it really looks like. They've cracked mobile. Their ad, last 5 seconds.
G'day, welcome to Todd's Kitchen. I really love smoothies. They can be healthy, delicious, and they fill you up all at the same time. So join me today as I make one of my personal favourites, which is a honey banana smoothie.
And you can see it's a truly immersive mobile experience that makes you want to click and consume more. Is there anyone here from YouTube or Google? No one. Okay. So the fact is that YouTube, really sucks on mobile, right? The app, we know, right? They keep upgrading it. The design changes a little bit here and there, but really it's not a great experience. You can't even, it's supposed to be a music player, but you can't really keep it on and listen to music, et cetera, right? So there are a lot of problems with that. These guys have cracked mobile way better than YouTube has, in my opinion. But YouTube, at the end of the day, belongs to in my opinion, one of the two most powerful companies in the world right now in a certain area. And I don't know. So I was a lot more optimistic about Vessel 6 months ago, but let's see. Again, the jury's out. How many people here on this thing? Okay. How many people here above the age of 30 on Snapchat? Okay. All right. So I went on to Snapchat, but I went on to Snapchat not to communicate with anyone. I went on to Snapchat to consume Discover, which I'll tell you about in a second. But I actually have met, in the past 3 months, I've met people in their 40s and 50s who've gone onto Snapchat so they can keep in touch with their kids who are teenagers back home whenever they're traveling. But here's Discover. So it's not just user-generated content. It's not just content back and forth in communication. There's professional content streams, which is a big part of their business.
We're here in Antarctica.
It's the news you need to know to be in the know.
I would argue that True Detective is fun.
Sarah D. Nice?
Do you mean Denise?
Oh, no.
Cars over here completely buried.
Good amount of heat, great pepper background flavor.
So that's Discover, and there's a lot of other interesting things to know about Snapchat. One is that there's 100 million daily active users. Right? That's a big number. It's not as big as Facebook or anywhere close to it. It's about 1/10 of Facebook, but it's still a very big number, right? Because Snapchat is not Facebook. We know that. The other thing to know about it is that there are 9,000 snaps per second. Per second! On Snapchat. That's crazy. The third thing to know is that there are 60 billion monthly visits of Discover. That's the professional part. Now just look at the scale of this thing, right? Two more very interesting things to know. One is that there are, okay, this is astounding, 8 billion daily video views. That's equal to Facebook. Did you guys even know that Facebook has 8 billion daily views of video? That's insane. I'll tell you why. Okay, and it's equal to Facebook with only 10% of their daily audience. And most interestingly, 76% of Snapchat users purchase products online. You can see where this is going, and I can guarantee you it's going to go there. It is going to be a commerce platform very, very soon. In fact, if you look at who they've got on their board now, the editor of Cosmo New York is on their board, and that's to do with actually getting into women-centric e-commerce. BuzzFeed. Now, it's a little, there's a question mark in my head because I know that BuzzFeed's really big in the English-speaking world, and they have a few other editions. There's French, German, Portuguese, etc., but they don't have Asian language editions specifically. So I'm not sure how big BuzzFeed is in this audience. How many people have consumed BuzzFeed content in the past 30 days? Okay, reasonable, fine. It's really interesting what they're doing because if you observe their strategy, it really encapsulates and is reflective of what's happening in terms of go where the audience is, right? You have to find where your audience is. Now, the first thing to note is that in the past 90 days, and this slide is a little bit outdated, full disclosure, I've used it before a few months ago, but I think the figure's only gone up from there. 6, I think, is the number. 6 of the 20 most watched videos in the past 90 days in the world are BuzzFeed videos. That's huge. That's more than 25%, right? But here's the interesting thing, that only 5% of those views are on BuzzFeed.com. So where are people watching it? They're watching it everywhere else. They're not going to BuzzFeed.com. BuzzFeed is coming to them. And that's the whole point, right? 161 of their videos, again, I'm sorry if this might be a little bit outdated. I was really trying to look for an updated statistic, but this is from November or December. 161 videos have 10 million plus views. 46% of their views are on YouTube, 37% on Facebook, 17% on Vine, That's the actual views. But check out the engagement, okay? And this is telling for something we come on to later. 61% of their engagement comes from Facebook and only 38% from YouTube. So what's so great about BuzzFeed? Their secret sauce is a community that shares. Down to every little thing in that company is all about shareability and sharing. The single biggest metric for any piece of content they put out is how many people are going to share it. They actually don't give a shit about how many people watch it or read it. They care about how many people are going to share it. That's what's most important to them. Be Beautiful is something that we do. Jack in the Box, the agency brand I spoke of, we run this content for Unilever, okay? And the reason why I'm talking about this is, again, it's a demonstration of how you need to know where your audience is. Be Beautiful is, hats off, I mean, full credit to Unilever, being a traditional consumer goods company, to actually support and launch a publishing brand, which is run out of our office by 8 people, but they own it and they support it, and it's for their marketing purposes. But it's a bona fide publishing brand, which happens to be one of the largest destinations online for women in India today.
Till 2013, Be Beautiful used to be a paid media-driven website created by Unilever's beauty brands and had minimal relevance in India. When we were asked to relaunch it, our challenge was to make Be Beautiful one of India's leading platforms for beauty, fashion and lifestyle. So we turned Be Beautiful into a publisher that generated relevant content for the everyday woman. We put a team of specialized beauty journalists and fashion photographers and crafted an editorial strategy born out of our audience's needs and aspirations. Our goal is to democratize beauty and make it accessible to the everyday woman so that she looks and feels beautiful. That's why, instead of unattainable top models and celebrities, we work with bloggers and influencers that people can relate to. Even our specialized experts are real people who listen to their audience's insecurities and motivations in order to provide them tips, advice, and solutions. And in partnership with YouTube, we launched Vlog On, an initiative that enabled leading fashion and beauty bloggers to connect with Be Beautiful readers through DIY videos using products from participating brands. To amplify our content, we use our social media channels as broadcasters to build an engaged, organic, and robust readership for our main platform. As a result, in a time where most brands are struggling to connect with consumers every day, Be Beautiful has managed to do exactly that by creating relevant, organic, and consistent content that has generated sustained engagement and improved the relationship between our brands and consumers. In less than a year, millions of women in India think of Be Beautiful as their main reference for beauty, fashion, and lifestyle. And the best part is that they all look and feel beautiful.
So, sorry, that case study is a little bit outdated. Again, you're like, okay, what does this guy do? Does he just recycle his presentations? No. So the video is a little bit outdated, but there are statistics which I'll tell you about. But the most important thing to note about Be Beautiful is that it is a content brand that's consumed uniquely across various channels, right? The figures now are at about 12 million visits annually, and that's a big number. And most of it, half of it is organic. Business Insider. Again, I know that this is a global media brand, but I don't think it's published in a lot of Asian languages, so I'm just checking how many people actually consume Business Insider content either once in their lives or regularly, right? So it's, someone described it to me yesterday as the Huffington Post and Financial Times having a love child. They recently launched, okay, they have a brand called Insider. So they were really successful with business news, which was sort of, let's call it popular business news and content. And they are launching something called Insider, which is their general news brand. And Insider is going to be launching sometime this quarter, the site. But it's already existed for 6 months. Not on the site, not as the actual web destination. It's existed on social. And they've been putting out content for Insider on Facebook, on Twitter, for 6 months before the site even existed. And this is the way that the world is today. In fact, we're actually drawing inspiration from this and doing some of this stuff ourselves, which I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. So they can't monetize it, but they are agglomerating their audience, right? Here's a brand that I'll talk about in a minute. Sorry, I was just periscoping all of you. This is a brand that has a truly unique relationship with content. Okay, so it's been, I think it was about 4 years ago when I first mentioned GoPro in a talk like this. At that point, I asked how many people in the audience had actually used a GoPro. And I brought the GoPro onto stage, and about 5 people in the audience, I think this was at Dubai Links 2012 or something, 5 people put up their hands. So let me ask now, how many people here have ever used a GoPro? Ah, finally a lot of hands. Okay. All right. So, why is GoPro's relationship with content so unique? Think about what they do. Okay, they get you to pay them $500 a piece for the privilege of marketing for them. How? Basically, you buy their cameras and you go and capture footage, which looks so damn awesome that you share it with everyone. Everyone loves it, and basically the GoPro brand grows. Sheer genius, if you ask me. Okay, it's time to speak about the granddaddy of the content world. Facebook has had a bit of an interesting relationship with the world in general, right? Some people love it, some people hate it, it goes up and down. Right now, Facebook is on a real high, okay? And we'll talk about that in a moment. Let's just look at some statistics for a second, okay? 91% of users on Facebook are millennials. I'm just thinking, are there that many millennials? Yes, it makes sense, okay? 8 billion video views per day, which we just talked about in the context of Snapchat right now. 100 billion hours of video viewed daily by 500 million viewers. 56% of people say they visit the site multiple times a day. How many people keep going onto Facebook more than like 2 or 3, 4 times a day? You can't be the only one, come on. Yeah, okay, great. 63% of users say Facebook is a source of news for them, and that's very, very important, and I'll tell you why. And 78% of their ad revenue comes from mobile. Now, the 78% from mobile is very important because that's been the key to their success. As the world goes from desktop to mobile, they have emerged dominant, and that's what's happened. And they weren't really counting on it. It was a bet that they had made that could work out, and it worked out beautifully for them. Okay. The other thing is about video. You can see 2 of these stats over here about video. Now, everyone associates video with YouTube, but do you know that actually now there are 2 people sitting at that table, the high table of video supremacy. YouTube isn't the only one who's dining over there. Facebook has come and occupied a seat right opposite them, and they're fighting it out. YouTube's dominance is being challenged. It's not like I have anything against YouTube, by the way, because I was dissing their mobile interface earlier, and now I'm saying this, but it's true. And the fact is, there's only one basic reason that's pointing towards it, right? Now, unless you're 15 years old, which I'm not even sure if 15-year-olds do this, but I think they might. Do you ever go onto YouTube and say, okay, let's see what's going on YouTube today? Now, when was the last time you did that? I don't think anyone does that, unless you're 15, like I said. But you do go onto Facebook, not just once or twice, sometimes several times a day, saying what's going on Facebook, right? And that is a very, very powerful thing, because that then allows them to serve you video. The other thing is that YouTube shares all their video revenue. Facebook doesn't share a cent, right? And everyone's waiting for it. I was at a conference in Los Angeles in June last year, and everyone was on the same page to say that by the end of this year, 100% Facebook is going to start sharing revenue for monetization with content creators. They still haven't done it. They have all the technology ready, but they haven't done it. And there's probably some reasons behind it. Maybe they don't need to, right? If you look at that 63% figure about being a source of news, that's where Facebook has really upped its game, right? And they've become the central destination for publishing. Think of how we consume content today. And I'm not talking about movies and TV shows necessarily. I'm talking about stuff that we read, right? Magazine/newspaper kind of content, which is not print that arrives at your home in the morning. A lot of it is on Facebook. A lot of it is stuff that's shared, and it's built for that, right? And so that becomes a very powerful thing, to the point that maybe it's too powerful a thing, because there are questions being raised. If there is any form of monopoly or restrictive trade practices that might need to be addressed, I think Facebook might have a problem on its hands very soon, because they really control, they're the gatekeepers of a lot of what you consume. They can shape human opinions, even in terms of the algorithm of what you consume, or the kinds of conversations that you have. Some people say that Facebook, because your friends are your newsfeed, and so people are very like-minded, so it's very easy to think that what you think is the only way to think, because you're kind of, obviously there are debates on Facebook as well, and there are fights on Facebook, but you kind of start drinking your own Kool-Aid. So I'm not just being critical of Google, I'm also being critical of Facebook. I think they're on a great trajectory right now, but they will have something to watch out for. Even if you look at, the way that they're growing is pretty phenomenal as well. I think their growth has slowed down, but that's bound to happen. But if you just look at the power behind, you remember this thing, right?
All right, here we go. That was really cold.
This was a Facebook campaign, and they really managed to kind of get under the skin of the entire planet with this. That's how powerful they are. Taking an example of a publisher going on, these guys also use Facebook in a great way, but in terms of, another way that content is getting distributed is brands working with publishers that have a captive audience, a very strong, loyal audience, to create content for them, also known as native advertising. This is a very American example of this stuff, but there's, Guess, Macy's, Stolish and I, etc., work with Refinery 29. This is just an example of, the kind of stuff that's happening in terms of brands don't have to create their own platform necessarily, like Be Beautiful. You can work with publishers to have customized content that talks about your brand, which actually brings us to the main message of today, which is, whatever you do, you need to go to where the audience is. You can't expect the audience to come to you. If there's one message you should take out of this today, is to go to where your audience is, which is why we created Superfly. At Superfly, we're building content brands direct to audiences, and we're going to where the audience is. So Superfly is a company that started it was incubated within my company, the 120 Media Collective. We've just spun it off as a separate company, where again, we're building content brands direct to audiences. And we're doing this in a few different ways. So here's an example of some of the content that we're creating. So it's across a wide variety of genres. There's personalities, there's comedy, there's music, etc. This is just a snapshot of some of it. And this is much like a multi-channel network, or the Maker Studios model that some of you may know of, which is working with talent and creators to create content for YouTube. But except we're not doing it just for YouTube, we're doing it across a variety of platforms, wherever the audience is. And most interestingly now, though, we are building let's call them sort of larger, deeper content brands. So for example, there's Investonomics. There's a guy named Vivek Law who used to be the editor of Bloomberg India. He then was the financial editor of the India Today group, and he recently joined us to start Investonomics in partnership, which is, if you think about it, personal finance, like healthcare, is a very high priority space for a lot of people, but it's also very intimidating, and we're attempting to demystify it through a video-first content brand. And it's not necessarily going to be serious, it's going to be for mainstream audiences, also for millennials, also for women, and for the Indian diaspora. So it'll speak to different audiences in a different manner. And again, we'll go to where the audience is and agglomerate audiences across various platforms. Then we have Superstage. Now in India, college festivals are a very big thing, right? And so you have, every college has a festival, and so Superstage is, think of it as an online intercollegiate festival with a lot of user-generated content. Think of brands who want to target youth and what a wonderful platform this is for them, right? And then there's another slide which somehow has gone missing from this presentation. It's not Adfest's fault, it was missing before I gave my presentation to them. So I was just reviewing it on my way before I came here and I realized it's missing. Football. Now India, everyone knows India as the land of cricket, which it is. But what's happening very interestingly, which if you're not Indian you may not realize this, if you look at the male demographic in the top 10 cities in India, age 15 to 35, football is actually becoming a much more popular sport. It's the #1 sport digitally online in India today, and these kids or young people who are watching it are not consuming Indian football, they're watching, English Premiership and Serie A, like in the rest of Asia as well. And so there's a big opportunity over there because there is no football brand targeted at Indian youth. There's a company called Diagonal View in London, which owns a 10% stake in Superfly, which also owns the world's largest football channel on YouTube called Football Daily. And so together in partnership with them, we're creating something for the Indian audience. And again, it's going to be across various platforms. And then it's not just that kind of content, there's also fiction and non-fiction, which we're creating. Once you have access to the audience, why not create content for them, right? And I'm just gonna, before I end, I'm gonna leave you with a little trailer of something that we created at Superfly a little bit early in our career. So we launched in April, this was in the same month. There was a couple of guys who worked at a startup in Bangalore and they quit their jobs, they were passionate about mountaineering, and they went to climb Everest in April 2015, which is also the month that the Nepal earthquake happened. And they were up there and at Everest Base Camp, and they managed to capture some crazy, devastating footage, and we basically created a web series out of it, which was really well received. So I'm going to leave you with a bit of a trailer of that.
On 25th of April 2015, our lives changed forever. Two ordinary guys decided to do the unconventional, climb to the highest point in the world at 29,030 feet, to Mount Everest. After all the prep and of about 2 years of giving it everything, the biggest tragedy in the history of mountaineering hit us. Watch our story of survival, adventure, and thrill.
And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much. Thank you.